Thank you for coming to the community budget meeting number 1. We're here to provide the members of the community and those who are interested either in person with us or online on Zoom to really hear about what the City Council and the finance team has been doing with our budget. We welcome any information, any feedback that you may have. So the presentation will be provided by Administrative Service Director Alfaro to kind of walk you through where we are. And if we can ask you to hold your questions perhaps towards the end of the presentation so that we can gauge time and also just to kind of provide all of those questions back to you. This meeting is being recorded and it will be available on our city's YouTube channel for you to review afterwards. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Christina.
Thank you, City Manager Wu. Sorry, make sure everybody can hear me here. I have about 20 slides. I'm going to try to get through them as quickly as possible, but really what we're trying to do is kind of give you information as to how did we get in our current budget situation, what were the causes of it, what we've done to date, what our forecast looks like, what are the next steps, and then some community engagement you can look forward to. So we really want to kick off with the CDTFA audit, and that's an acronym for the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. Excuse me. And this is the state body that's in charge of collecting and remitting sales tax dollars. And so we were under audit, or one of our taxpayers in the city was under audit by CDTFA, and we were looking at 73% reduction in sales tax revenue potentially because of this audit. And so we've been, in a future slide, I'll kind of talk about the path that we took or the timeline for what happened with the audit. And really what this meant when we looked at the numbers and the potential of the loss of this sales tax revenue was that the city needed to balance about a $30 million loss or about a 28% loss in revenue. However, this loss was not one time. This was ongoing. The result of the audit would likely result in dollars being taken away from the city into the future, which resulted in a structural deficit. And a structural deficit really just means that our expenses are outpacing our revenues in the long term, that there's no, currently in our forecast, a path where revenues exceed expenditures. And that's really where we're trying to get to. And so the city started working on a plan on how to balance the budget, how we could reduce ongoing expenses and find ways to increase ongoing revenue. And that was really the main precipice of how we ended up in our budget situation today. So let's go into a little bit of detail regarding the CDTFA audit and what are the different things that have occurred. The timeline before you, you'll see the city was first made aware of the audit in December of 2021, and then an additional update was given to the city of May of 2022, where they just provided a little more information on the different sales tax quarters they were looking at. In March, staff had a meeting with CDTFA where they advised of their decision to reallocate some revenue, but that dollar impacts would follow, including any one-time or ongoing in 4 to 6 months. That letter that we're waiting for, the official, that we call that the determination letter, and city staff received that in October of 2023, that included the dollar impacts. Now, between March and October of 2023, we didn't just sit idle. Staff made significant efforts at the state level to try to mitigate the impact to the city. Unfortunately, those were unsuccessful, and thus we received the letter in October. Since October, City Council gave the authority to the city attorney to begin the appeal process with the CDTFA, and that's currently where we are. So now looking at council actions, you'll see that in June of 2023, the council adopted the final budget for the current fiscal year, so fiscal year 23-24, which resulted in a $15 million reductions. And we're going to cover that a little later, what made up that $15 million. In October, after we received the letter, the council establishes a committed reserve. Committed just means that council has the authority to commit those funds or to uncommit those funds, that the authority lies with the city council. So they set aside a sales tax repayment reserve of $56.5 million. In November, as part of first quarter, staff brought to council and council approved some reductions for the upcoming fiscal year. Now, these reductions were specifically talked about in November because they had impacts that we needed to decide by December if we were going to go forward or not go forward. One of those were as a reduction to our 4th of July festivities that was included there. We'll talk about that one a little bit later too when we get to service level reductions. The other item that happened, so in December, we talked about trying to explore expenditure reducing strategies and revenue increasing strategies. Staff presented to City Council potential information on potential tax measures and the possibility of surveying the community to see if there was an interest in any of these tax measures. Staff was given direction to survey the business community and come back. Then in January, it was the first time we presented to council or publicly what we're calling service level reductions. And we presented about $10.5 million worth of service level reductions to council. We'll go over those in a later slide as well, which brings us to February 2023. The council received the fee study, and so this is important. The fee study did not change our fees. It just simply provided information on where we were in terms of cost recovery. And the fees, any changes to the fees will come before council in April. The other thing we did is we followed up from the direction in December, and we brought back community outreach information for the revenue tax measures, in addition to new information related to tax measures that were different legislations that are floating around the state, and ultimately decided not to pursue surveying those tax measures. So next, I wanted to just kind of start with a brief overview of what we've done to date and give you a little more detail as we come along in the slides. So the first thing I think we may not have done the best job of describing, but when staff was looking at what service level reductions, what expenditures we were going to reduce, our goal was always to try to maintain as many city services as possible. So that was kind of an overarching theme that, thinking back on it, we may not have done the best job of describing. And we've really been focused on the expense side when we're looking at reductions. 85% of the $30 million that we need, of the gap that we need to close, have been either expenditure reductions that have been included in this year's budget or that we're recommending for next year's budget. The remaining 4.5% or 15% that's needed to balance the structural deficit has yet to be identified. So we're not quite sure if that's going to be revenue enhancements or expenditure reductions. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, about why that's not as concerning as it maybe had been previously, that we haven't figured out that last portion of it. So this is just a graphical representation or a visual representation of what I just described on the previous slide for any of those visual learners out there. I also want to just take a moment to cover. You may be thinking, Christina, didn't you say it was a $30 million gap? Why are you only showing me $15 million on this slide? And that's, if you may recall, when we talked about council actions and a few slides back, $15 million of reductions were already approved in the current year, leaving only the other 15 remaining. So let's talk about those $15 million we've already reduced. Where did those come from? We eliminated 14 vacant positions. We made decreases across, I think, pretty sure all revenue, all expenditure categories amounting to about $5 million. We also decreased transfers from the general fund to other funds. This is basically, for some funds, the general fund was subsidizing, but the biggest impact here was reducing the funding or the transfer out to really cover pavement maintenance for the city. The last item on there, $1.4 million, is for the use of the city's Section 115 trust to fund other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. This is a retiree health benefit that the city offers. And the city has had this benefit fully funded for quite a few years. So given the city's budget issues, we thought it was prudent at this time to draw down on those funds to pay for those expenses. That wrapped up the current fiscal year. So now moving forward into the next fiscal year. And I think it's important to note that of the service level reductions I'm going to discuss, Council has not officially made a decision on these. They've provided direction to staff, and they won't actually make a decision on these until the final budget is adopted in June of this year. And so what we tried to do with the service level reductions, again, those were presented to council on January 17th, 2024. So if you did want to see the detailed, so what we're doing is providing them here in summary. If you wanted to see the detailed service level reductions, they can be found for that council meeting date under our it's budget, I think it's called budget update for that meeting. So the categories, the groupings that we had, operations and maintenance, this was really a reduction to our sidewalk, curb, and gutter program. We also moved some public works contracts, so did away with them, bringing that work in-house, which is really going to result in an extended maintenance timelines. We also shifted, looking to shift credit card fees to customers. That means when you come in and play with your credit card, city currently picks up any fees on the credit card for using it. We're going to pass those on to the customers using the credit cards. And then a few other items here as well. For infrastructure, this is mainly related to reducing the funding related to our CIP. So historically, any excess fund balance has been transferred to CIP. We stopped that process in 2021 after we heard, 2021 because of COVID, and then in 2022 we continued it because of this audit. And so really the idea there is for the first 5 years of the forecast, they'll use existing savings in the capital reserve to cover maintenance cost. The other big item here is an alternate service delivery related to the shifting of sidewalk and tree maintenance to the property owners, as well excuse me, as well as shifting costs back to the school districts for the ground maintenance of school district properties that the city has currently available for use. Fiscal accountability, this is really looking hard at our budget, trying to figure out post-COVID, what are our new normals, what do we need, what can be reduced, and bringing those actuals, the budget back in line with our new actuals. The other thing we did is looking at defunding our potential new enterprise resource planning software. This is basically the finance and HR software for the city. Lastly, we have the community benefit section at about $463,000. The first item on there is reduced 4th of July. So we did discuss earlier that decision was made back in November, but we just wanted to include it here as a continuity so it didn't get lost. For all of the other items listed, council gave direction to staff to not remove these for the budget, but to find alternate funding sources for these events or programs. There's also an asterisk here that I want to point out. So the other direction we were given by council is for the crossing guard reduction that was proposed, would have been a $50,000 reduction, to leave that in the budget. And so you'll see it just asterisk there at the bottom. And so you'll see through the presentation, we're talking about 10.5 million. It's if you added the 50 here, you would have rounded up to 10.5. So with that, I wanted to give some insight into staff's budget recommendations to date by asking a few questions and seeing if in general we can build some consensus. I'll ask about 3 different questions and ask for head nods in the room or thumbs up on Zoom. So if you'll bear with me here as we go through this. The first question I have, you could thumbs up or thumbs down in the audience too, is how can the city balance the budget? So my response is we can either reduce expenditures or we can increase revenues. In general, do we feel like we can agree with that? That's generally how you balance your budget? Yep, perfect. So the next question is, who provides most of the services to residents? So my response is city employees. So in general, do we feel like yes, maybe, no? Okay, I'm seeing some head nodding in the audience there. The next question is, how is city government funded? And this is taxes and fees. So in general, can we get some head nods? Is that, yep, okay, perfect. Looks like we got some consensus. I'm gonna look over to my my Zoom table and make sure we're good. Okay, perfect. All right, so bearing that in mind and also remembering that the city's overall goal when we were looking for reductions was to maintain city services, we want to walk through some feedback we've been hearing from the community about how staff has been going about trying to balance the budget. And so the first thing that we've been hearing is the city needs to reduce its expenses. And we couldn't agree more, right? We talked earlier, 85% of the actual or recommended reductions are to reduce our expenditures. Next we heard, but the city should not reduce services to residents. Again, staff agrees. The majority of the expenditure reductions have been made with a goal to maintain as many services to our residents as possible. We're also hearing a solution that is, instead, we should balance the budget by reducing the number of employees. And we have actually done this. We talked earlier about the 14 positions that were reduced. The thing I forgot to mention when we're talking about service level reductions, there's actually 10.6 positions included in those recommendations as well. So that's part of the 10.5. However, to reduce employee count further will likely result in service level impacts, which is something that we've heard from our community they don't want to do. And we're going to have these impacts, either one, because there's less staff available to provide the services. We could look at alternate service delivery models, but this could likely result in reduced service levels. Another impact to residents, if we were looking at alternative service delivery models, could be potentially increased fees to provide increased cost or fees to provide those same services. So that brings us to the feedback we are hearing about increasing ongoing revenue. And the city should also not increase fees or taxes. So if we can agree that the way to balance the budget is to decrease expenditures or increase ongoing revenues, and the goal of turning each of these levers is to do so while maintaining city services, you can see why it is difficult to not reduce services and not increase revenues, all while still trying to maintain city services. But there's some good news here. This isn't a problem we have to solve this year. We're going to talk a little bit about our fund balance and our forecast and how those interplay with each other and how that buys us a little bit of time to figure out where we go next. So with that, let's get into the budget forecast. And so here on this chart, we kind of show over, including the current year into the next few years, all the red bars showing our expected deficits. I'm going to highlight the bar at the end because that's really when we get to that $15 million number. When we look at the upcoming fiscal year 25, even 26 and 27, you can see that those deficits range from the $10 to $12 million range. So if we're able to even get a portion of the $10.5 million, right, we'll be able to get closer and having to only use maybe $5-6 million worth of fund balance annually. And here's where that becomes important. So fund balance is like the city's savings account. It's one-time money. Once you use it, you can't really replenish it unless you're making more money than you're bringing in, and currently that's the problem that we're in. We're in the opposite of that, where we're spending more than we're bringing in. So that's generally, we're talking about savings for the city. I know that most people want to go to the bottom line and go right there. And so there you can see anywhere from $140 million available to $126.8 million. And that's the total that we have in our fund balance or in our savings. However, you'll also see to the left the different classifications. Those are kind of different buckets, and each bucket has a different restriction of how those dollars can be used or who can kind of take those dollars out of that bucket. But really, I want you to focus on the $26 million. Because once you fill all the other buckets, what's left over goes into this unassigned category. And that's really the dollars we have available to spend. So when we look at the forecast on the previous slide, forecasting, hey, if only half of the service level reductions went in, we're looking at $5 to $6 million we need a year. We have 26, right? So you could get through the next probably 2 or 3 years and still have some money in this unassigned category. And that's what I mean by that last 4.5. We don't necessarily need to solve that this fiscal year, but we do need a plan, right? There should be a plan as we go forward. And so I know sometimes some of this language can be overwhelming and hard to kind of like, what are you talking about? Restricted and committed and unassigned. And so what I'm hoping to do in the next slide is provide you a practical example of how this works. And so I'm hoping I improved this presentation from when I did it at mid-year too, so if somebody can provide me that feedback if they think this makes more sense. So we tried to go not just talking, but give you a graphical, a little animated presentation. So total fund balance is $137.5 million. However, we have about $500,000 in the non-spendable category. So think of this, you loan somebody money, they haven't paid you back, but you're still trying to keep track of it in your checking account. So it's non-spendable. I don't actually have it, I can't spend it. It's what we call a loan receivable. Next, we're looking at restricted. So restricted means I don't really have a choice on how to use this money. Somebody from the outside is dictating that. With tax season around the corner, I'd like to think of that for any of us who may need to pay the state or the Fed some money. Think about it that way. I'm setting aside some money for any taxes I may need to pay at that level. Next is the committed category. We talked about this one just a little bit earlier. In this one, if this is my checking account, I have the discretion for how I set this money aside. This could be a rainy day fund. This could be a vacation fund. This could be, I know last year when my car got serviced, they said I need new tires, and so I want to set aside some money. But I have the discretion. So if I decide there's a really great show I want to go watch, and I'm going to dip into it to go to this show, I have the ability to do that. I can make that decision. However, if on my way up to the show, my tires blow out, I no longer have that money that I set aside to cover that expense. So there's just a little bit of risk involved here. Next, we have the assigned. And this is really, we have to set aside some money for future obligations. We call those encumbrances. So it usually means it's locked up in a contract. It's a future obligation to pay. We have that set at about $5 million, right? But the big story here is think of this as payments that are coming due. I've got my credit card bill, I've got my mortgage, I've got my car payment. I need to set some of these dollars aside. You may even think longer term, property tax bill, something like that, where you're just setting that money aside. And so that leaves us with the $26 million in the unassigned. Again, this is the money that if we're looking to focus to do short-term solutions to balancing our budget, these are the dollars that we're looking at. So with that, hopefully that wasn't overload of information. We are trying, it is one of our goals, one of my goals, to try to make this as easy to understand as possible. We're gonna cover next steps. And so it's a long road to budget adoption, and this is really the roadmap to how we get there. Anything grayed out will be steps that have already been taken, and I've discussed, I think, most of these already in the presentation. The box with the white box with the red border around it is where we are at today. The next two big items that you may want to be considering if you're following this budget roadmap is we'll do another budget update on the capital improvement plan in March, along with some council goal setting and work program. We'll have a second community budget meeting in April, and then we'll be looking at presenting the proposed budget in May. That normally prints on or around May 1st, and then adopting the budget in June of 2024. So next, we are a pretty active finance team, budget team, if you will, and so we do get out into the community, I think more than maybe some other budget teams. And so leading up to back to April to date, we've been doing some different things. So the first we're going to talk about is the most recent, which is this interactive town hall meeting, which will take place in February and again in April. We also sent out a budget survey, and we've done different community outreach. You may have seen us in front of the library, at the Earth Day Festival, at the farmers market. We've really been out there trying to get the message out to our residents. We've also tried to incorporate feedback that we've heard from the community, and also making sure we're bringing that feedback back to council. Here's what we're hearing the community is saying, so that they have that available in their decision-making process. We also want to talk about some resources. We have got some really great things on our website, and we actually just added something that's really, really interesting. And I know from previous audit committees, from council members wanting more information. Can we get, this stuff is not easy to understand. Can you simplify it? Can you make it more digestible? And so what we've put together is what we call the Budget Learning Library. There's only one new piece, but I'm very excited about the new piece. And that's what we're calling Budget Bites, or Budget 101. These are short video clips that introduce different concepts, like What is fund accounting? What is fund balance? How does fund balance work? So some of the basics when it comes to governmental budgeting and accounting. So we have the QR code, we have the website address listed. The other tools we have been up there for a while. These are award-winning budget tools. We have our forecast tool, which allows you to click on and off and choose different scenarios for our 10-year forecast. This data is about at least a couple days, a couple years, kind of outdated. We haven't updated it, but really the whole purpose behind this tool is to see how the addition and subtraction of items either helps to balance the budget or unbalance the budget. Next, we have our resident tax calculator. This is a really great tool. If you haven't checked this one out, I encourage you to. We actually had this tool out for Earth Day last year. We had people guessing, how much do you think you pay towards the city's budget in your taxes? I'm pretty sure not one person got it right. So that's why I think it's a really informative tool. So you can go there, enter in your information, and find out how much you're paying in general, an estimate, how much are you paying to the city in taxes, and then how is the city utilizing those tax dollars. Resources continued. We have the CDTFA audit website where we have FAQs, different information. If you didn't feel like you got enough from my brief presentation on what's happening with the CDTFA, I encourage you to go to that website and take a look at it. We also have our old tried and true, it's been around for a while, but our interactive financial transparency portal, OpenGov, and that allows you to have access to over 10 years worth of actual and budget data for the city. We have some saved views for questions that are asked pretty frequently. And then also, we want to hear from you. So we have an email, budgetteam@cupertino.gov, that sends an email straight back to us. So if you think of something after this meeting that was like, oh, I wanted to ask this, or I wonder if they thought about that, feel free to email us there, and we do our best to get back to you, depending on what's happening at City Hall at the time, as quickly as we can. Last slide before turning it over back to City Manager Wu is we're going to be doing a community budget meeting survey. So this is the feedback. How did we do? What should we do better for the next one? And so what will happen is the survey will go out after this meeting. If you're in person, there was a sign-in sheet when you came in. If you can provide your email address there. If you registered via Zoom, we'll use that email address to send you the link. Some logistics, the survey will only work for the email which you have submitted, and that survey can only be submitted once per email. So with that, I will hand it over to City Manager Wu to go over some closing remarks and open it up for questions.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for an amazing presentation. I don't know how she was able to bring us 6 months worth of work into a 20-minute presentation with animation. I might lose her to Hollywood sometime. So with that said, and I also want to thank for those who were able to come in person, and hopefully we have some Zoom audience. So for the next section of this meeting really is to allow us to have an interactive conversation. This is not a council meeting. This is where we could have more of a dialogue. So if you are in person in the audience and you would like to ask us a question, we just want you to come to the microphone. Not that we want to put you to test, so that we can record you and we can hear you. And for those of you who are on Zoom, if you can raise your hand, and either Jenna or Tony can let us know. Or for those of you who are on the shyer side that you just wish to keep it to yourself, feel free to put your questions in the chat box and then or into our email, and we'll be more than happy to answer it that way. As Christina alluded to earlier, we're here to answer any questions. And this is not a one-time solution. I love her slides in terms of what do we do? We've been brainstorming this question for quite some time with council, with members of public. We're hoping that this is a process where we can solicit your idea. This is not a Pamela problem. This is not a city council problem. This is our city of Cupertino problem. So we're really here to hear from you. And is there something that we haven't thought about? My department heads hate me because I have actually made them turn over every rock. Everything that we know of. Christina and I were kind of the target in City Hall, right? They run every time they see us going down the hall. But we want to come to you to see if there's something that we haven't thought about. Something that, hey, that's a great idea. So really, that's what this is about. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over this to the QA section, see if there's any opportunity we can interact. Thank you very Santosh. Thank you for getting my cue. Go for it.
Thank you for the slides. That was really visual and very easy to understand. Appreciate that. There was the correlation between staff spending, or rather expenses versus staff that provide the services. But I think there's something in that category that is sometimes missed out when we discuss this, which is the consultant spend and the study projects. And my feedback would be, and this is what we do in the industry as well, we have to cut costs on a quarterly basis. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the industry. And the place we look for cutting is non-essential spend, that is things that don't affect customers, which in this case would be residents. And the places we look for are spend on consultants, spend on projects that are considered non-essential, that are non-customer impacting projects. And so would encourage you to look at what you can do in that space to reduce the number of study projects, reduce the number of consultants. And I think we're all in it together. We don't want to see any staff impact, especially staff that are on the ground dealing with the city services. We don't want to see any impact to staff. We appreciate everything our staff does. We have a pretty lean staff, and we are a city that appreciates everything that the city staff do. But it's important to look at all of the other places we can cut. So I would hope that we look at study projects and consultants. Thank you.
Great point. I would just lightly touch on, and Christina can go into detail. Great question, great point, and we've done that. So what we have done the first round, if you remember, is we actually eliminated all of the contract services, especially in the Parks and Rec and also Public Works world. Things that we could do in-house. We don't need consultants. Things that we could consolidate. So we've gone through, but great question. So maybe from a resident and also customer standpoint, are there more services, right? If you're seeing maybe, this other thing we could do. So great feedback. Christina, you want to go into a little bit?
Yeah, the only thing my turned on here. The only thing I would add to that is I think you made another excellent point. I feel like I'm not close enough to this microphone, sorry. I feel like you made another excellent point, which is we have a lean staff. And so that's the only other thing that I would say when we're looking at consultants to come in is sometimes it becomes the expertise because maybe it's something relatively new or relatively complex that sometimes there is that need to go out and get that expertise that may not exist on a staff. We're not a city of San Jose where it's like who does that person, who does that person. In Cupertino, you ask who does that and usually the fingers come pointing back at you. Right, because we do run so lean. So I think that's another consideration, but I wholeheartedly agree with city manager. We're looking at that. We're asking departments, we're tasking them with saying what can go away, what cannot be done to make those reductions. I think the other point I want to make is sometimes, not always, right? So not speaking in absolutes, but a lot of times the consultants are one-off costs, and that still helps, right? That's going to help build that savings, but it's not necessarily something that will go on into the future generally, right? And so that there's sometimes that impact too. All of that to say is absolutely there are things that we're looking at. I don't want it to come across as that we're discounting it for all these reasons. I think we just, it's nice to have this meeting because we can have the conversation, right? Have you considered this? Have you considered that, right? But from both sides, both from our residents and from staff up here. So thank you so much for the comments. I hope our responses kind of were able to answer or give you a little bit of insight. The other thing, I know that there's a timer, but I don't believe we're actually utilizing a timer. So just in case if someone gets close to the end of the time.
Yeah, unless you want to practice using a timer, I'm more than happy to deploy it. I don't see any other hands. Janet or Tony, do we have anybody on Zoom?
I think
we do.
One more question.
One more question. Okay. All right. Well, sorry, in-person trumps Zoom.
So, I would just, as a resident, point out that spending on parks and recs is the best form of spending that we residents really appreciate, because that is a win-win, because the residents benefit. If you just count the number of residents that benefit from your park and rec spending, be it on events, be it on community festivals, be it on youth and teen festivals and kids festivals, or even just the overall spend on park maintenance and park upkeep and adding capex to the parks, I think the outreach and the impact you have per dollar spent across the residents is probably one of the higher ones. So I would encourage you to really think about how you can increase your budget on parks and recs, because when I look at parks and recs right now, that is a small fraction. I believe parks and rec was like 28 million or something like that compared to some of the other departments. And I would really encourage you to look at increasing Parks and Rec and reducing in other places. And one metric perhaps you might consider is how do you measure the number of residents impacted per dollar that you spend? And I know that's a hard metric to look at, but those are the kinds of things that we have to quantify for ourselves in the corporate world. And so I'd encourage you to look at that. And hopefully you're going to give Parks and Recs a lot more money. That's money well spent. And you get kudos for that as well, because every time residents see a great event, they go out there, they thank the Parks and Rec staff. So thank you for considering that.
Thank you for a great compliment. I'm sure Rochelle is listening to this great compliment. I have to say, Cupertino prides on our Parks and Rec program. This is what makes Cupertino so special. I remember I was in a different meeting earlier. I can't remember which meeting. Oh, it's the school site meeting where we're talking to the superintendent about their fields. I'm a Sunnyvale resident, most people know. Something that was said is, we don't want our school to be maintained by Sunnyvale because Cupertino just brings to a different level. To me, that was a great compliment. I agree with you. So we'll definitely look into and to see how we can help Parks and Rec and definitely to keep that amenity available to our residents. Okay.
Tracy, we will. You're the next speaker. Will have 3 minutes to speak. Please unmute your mic.
Hi, thank you so much. I don't need 3 minutes. I just had a quick question. I know that it's balance sheet and not income statement, but why can't you treat the revenue from your investments as, or I guess not revenue, but the appreciation of your investments that you could potentially sell in the Chandler account? Why couldn't you treat that as potentially a revenue stream to help close the deficit? Thank you.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you for that question. And so we do, as part of our year-end process, our annual comprehensive financial report, we do what we call mark-to-market update, which is basically looking at the value of our investments. Currently, given the investment environment that we're in, that number is negative, just because as we're turning over investments, that number will become less negative. That is to say that if we were to sell basically we looked at our whole portfolio and were to sell before the investments came due, we would be selling them at a loss. And the city generally holds its investments to term. So I'm hoping that kind of helps answer it. So we are capturing kind of that difference, but if we were to go and we're not in a position where we could sell something early and make dollars for it. What we do is anything that's being currently comes to maturity and we're able to sell, we go in and we reinvest that based on an investment strategy that we work on with our investment advisor, Chandler.
Thank you. We will have the next speaker. Babu, please unmute your mic.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I echo the same sentiment as Santosh. First thing is, when it comes to parks, I think it should be part of everybody's convenience. Like at least it should be like this minimum for the city people to have a park, and it should be part and parcel of the life. And the second thing is, when it comes to security guards for the school, right, road crossing, I think that is where our concern lies. The day we hear the news that people are cutting down on the crossing guards, there was an accident. It was unfortunate, and every life counts. It's not easy, and it's a one-way traffic. It's a one life everybody has the privilege to live, and I don't see any reason or any thought on cutting down even a penny when it comes. Maybe if you want to add, I'll be very much happy. And even if you want to increase the tax dollars for the city people, that should be done. And there should not be any compromise, because once a life lost is lost. And even the elderly and the kids, they need additional safeguards. It may be an urgency from the driver. It may be a fault from the other person. So for any innocent life should not be bad just for accident. And it is especially critical for school-going kids. And I believe the city should be stepping up and making sure it's a zero incidents in entire calendar. And even one incident, it is not worth saving the cost. A life is, you think in your shoes like it is your kid, then take the decision. It's not like when you make the decision, you feel like what happens if you are in that shoe. Think about it on any cost cutting measures when it comes to anything. Think like that and then make the right decision. And you need to concentrate on revenue generation rather than revenue cutting. And I expect the city of Cupertino council members, everybody put their hats to think through how we can increase the revenue rather than cutting down on cost. Cost saving is the last measure and it should not be like first measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Babu. I think I heard your concern on the school crossing guard. So this was a topic that was discussed by the council as part of the service level reduction. Christina, correct me, but I believe council believed feel strongly to keep the service. So that's not something that council will move forward to eliminate that service level reduction.
That's correct. That was the direction that we received, is to remove that from the service level reductions. That was, we noted it as an asterisk, as a $50,000 that was originally up there, but has been added back to the base budget for that department.
Yeah, and then the other statement I heard, Babu, you said is looking at revenue and probably weigh that over the reduction. And I think in Christina's opening slide, we definitely went through that. And thank you for that comment, and we'll look into deeper into that. Thank you.
We have one more speaker. Peggy, please unmute your mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina Alfaro, for the presentation. And let's see, I'll go through quickly. I agree with San R that the consultants and the studies need to be reduced. I am concerned in the upcoming city council meeting, it appears to be a manager of CIP, and that to me should be an employee, to have skin in the game rather than have a consultant. And those are the things where key staff positions should remain in the city. To the Q&A, if you could post along with the slide presentation and the video, that would be wonderful. 3, let's see. Interest rates. In the Wells Fargo account, there's $50 million with no interest. Just 1% interest is $500,000. And Wells Fargo posts a relationship interest rate. I would think that if you hold $50 million in their account, you should have a really good relationship with them. So I would hope that you look into that to generate revenue. Let's see, projects, CIP projects that have been completed. If you could look at those that have been completed within a year, if they've got funds to release, please do so. I'm thinking specifically of the library addition and also the Memorial Park pond refill. Parks and Rec, as San R mentioned, it builds community, which then the more community you build, the more money and the more likely people are going to go with supporting you. School fields, in the discussion, these school fields are our parks. If you take away those parks, in your negotiation for maintenance of the fields, above all, please keep the access to the parks. Sidewalk, consider a co-op combo where it's 50-50 and the city provides the contractor or the staff. And I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
All right. Peggy, you have a packed of information. I'm going to try my very best to remember. I know Christina was taking notes. consultant and services that Santosh mentioned earlier, thank you. There was a question on the upcoming contract on the council agenda. I wish I can talk more, but it's for council to discuss, but more than happy to explain to you what the person does and why we're allowing this contract to go through for the Second Amendment. The Wells Fargo $50 million sitting there and not collecting any interest. Simply put, our investment policy restrict the amount of money that can be put into either a money market or a city account. Also, that is the money that we use to pay for our daily operation. Again, this is a very non-finance, simply put. CIP project closeout, great suggestion. We'll look into it to see if we can true up. With one caveat is that some of the projects do receive different levels of funding from either state government, federals, or whatnot. And a lot of times these grant fundings are not coming at the time of our desire. For instance, some of the grant funding could be 3 years, 5 years, or even longer. But once we receive the fund, yes, you're absolutely right. We should true up the accounting and bring the project to whole. I think I'm missing one. Crossing guard, right? No, sports fields at schools. Yes, and City Council has allowed us to start that conversation with CUSD, and staff is not negotiating, feeling some of the options to see if CUSD is even interested. We'll be bringing back this topic to Council for their final approval before the budget adoption happens in May and June. Am I missing anything?
I think you covered it all. Can I just do a little bit of follow-up? This is mostly, I think it really is just related to the comment on the CIP projects. With the update, I do want to plug that our I believe this is in our mid-year financial report, so if I didn't put this, if I'm getting the wrong location, the supplemental report for mid-year, I believe gave an explanation about several different projects and where they're at, but also to open up the hood a little bit. Even though you may see a project and it looks completed, sometimes there's still little straggler things that need to occur. And if we go and defund it, then I don't have the authority to pay for whatever little straggler pieces come in. And that's my very non-technical CIP speak. Stragglers, that's probably not a really good technical term for the folks in CIP, but that's another reason that you see it. And I do want to point out, at a minimum 2 times a year, we are meeting with CIP and we're having conversations. Hey, where's this project? There's not that much left. Or hey, it looks like the library's done. Are you ready to close that out? And usually what we do is we try either at mid-year and definitely at year-end to try to close out projects so we can free it up and find out how much is left in savings, how much can we, can we afford this project or maybe to do this other project with it.
You have another hand on Zoom. Lisa, please unmute your mic.
Hi. So, Christina, just because you were asking for input, yes, this was probably much easier for people to understand, even people that could understand what's been presented in the past. So thank you for those efforts, for sure. Peggy already asked about the interest rates. And consultants and studies reduction is on my list as well. I have a question that, well, I'm kind of dismayed that there's only 12 attendees on Zoom and it looks like 3 or 4 in the room. And I wish that, I know there's been outreach, but I think you missed some opportunities. For instance, when you spoke to Rotary City Manager and people were asking questions and there was no more time to ask questions, those people, I hope, were told about this because, and they're some of the 12, because there were people with that questions, and if they miss this opportunity, it's a shame. So letting people know when the second meeting is, ASAP, letting them know when that date and time is, and also letting them know that they can watch this one prior so they're kind of caught up. That would be really, really helpful, and I think the responsible thing to do. So I know some people will be asking when they see a slide or they hear that sidewalk maintenance may be cut and homeowners need to take care of that themselves. and street trees, I think, was similarly spoken of. But if you could just confirm that things that are happening, like I've had 5 months ago, my sidewalk, which weren't really bad, were at 7 o'clock in the morning getting ground up and this, that, and the other thing, and there's paint all over and there's flags all over very many places. And it's like, when is this going to get done? If those funds are in the restricted funds that are already, or the assigned funds, and this time around, these repairs are actually going to happen, I think that's good information to give. And that you're talking about moving forward, that the schedule for sidewalks and even roads will be changing possibly. I think that should be clarified because I just think it should. And then at the 2x2x1 CUSD and FUHSD, the superintendents were very hopeful that the maintenance of the fields could be continued, but they were willing, at least Stacy was willing to kick in something from the district. So I feel like that was on some slide as being something that would get cut. But if we've already kind of agreed with everybody that it's got to stay, just got to figure out how to do it, it feels inconsistent information.
Thank you, Lisa. So thank you for your compliment. I think there were 2.5 questions that I heard. Yes, we definitely can use a better announcement to make sure that more community members understand this meeting is taking place. Your comments is well said, and we will make sure that the next one is better published. There is a question on the sidewalks. As Christina alluded to earlier, that was a study session that went to council, and no formal direction or action has been taken by council. We will be coming back to council to confirm each item if they will remain in next year's budget or be eliminated. That said, the half question is whether or not this is another half question, whether or not the sidewalk program has been eliminated. No. So it should be business as usual. If you're having issue with your sidewalk in front of your house, more than happy to contact Public Works Department and we'll send staff out and work with you. The half question is on the sports field at CUSD, and you're absolutely right. During the meeting, there was a healthy conversation with CUSD, but also as Councilmember Wei mentioned during that meeting, this decision will be up for the entire council to make, and she will be briefing the council in terms of the conversation that took place on the 2x2x1. So no action that was taken by that body. Okay, no more.
I think there was just we missed one of Peggy's questions, which was related. Could we maybe pursue like a 50-50 split with the school district? And so I think we're exploring. I'm assuming we're having conversations with the school district, but I'll let you respond to that.
Well, we're looking into all possibility. We're having that conversation with CUSD.
Tracy did raise her hand again. Would we like to hear her?
Can I take the? We'll take the in-person. Councilmember Moore. We'll take your question first.
Thank you, and I'm representing myself only. I'm really excited about the budget bites information that you're going to be providing. When I look at the 10-year general fund balance forecast in the budget, you're showing it go down to 0, and we appear to be perhaps ahead of schedule, and I'm hoping that there could be some kind of narrative about that to explain it, maybe online so that we can read about it. But I have a couple other questions too, really with regards to educational information. So on page 162 of the budget, the current budget, the general fund expenditures by category, if we could have some more information about cost allocation and what that means, and also transfers, because these do show up as expenditures. I think transfers also show up in another category as well. And then perhaps also with contract services, if we can understand if that's audited and current for all the contracts that we have currently ongoing, and the same with materials, so that we can understand a little bit more about that. I really appreciated the question about the contracted employees, because when I look at this chart, it's unclear to me when I look at contract services if we're getting simply services for that, but we're not getting, and that's not any sidewalk getting built, that has nothing to do with pavement. So if that could be explained, I think that would really help. So anyway, I'm going to go back to being really excited about the budget bites. I think it's going to be very helpful. Right, thank you.
Thank you.
So I think, definitely, the forecast, that budget book, I love it, but I'm a budget geek, so, but it's a point in time. So I think we've heard the recommendations from me how to beef it up a little bit, so we will definitely look into doing that, and even the forecast. So, right, I think we've presented, at this point, I think we're up to a third forecast that we've gotten to council. So I think we did like maybe one in April, I think one is final budget, and one in October. So we continue to update it, and we'll continue to try to balance the line between overwhelming you with information, because we want you to read it, right? And just to be honest, some people, we love all the information. Other folks, it becomes overwhelming. So we do try to toe that line between just the right amount of information to make sure that folks read it. But wholeheartedly heard that comment. I think, thank you for the comment on Budget Bites. We have our email address up there. If something didn't make sense, you think we could present something better. The other thing I don't know if I mentioned this about the Budget Bites, but this is a video from 2019. And it's been on YouTube, and we had our video team slice it together into smaller bite-sized pieces, if you will, pun intended. And so as we're making this presentation, or we do our mid-year or first quarter presentation, if there was something that you felt like, hey, you did a really great job, it clicked, that was really good, let us know. We can work, we have a phenomenal video team, we can work with them to say, can you clip this off? Let's add it. So I think, we highly encourage you, reach out to us, use our email address, let us know what you're thinking, what are things that maybe you want more information on. We'd really love to grow that library, and we're really trying to work smarter, not harder, so utilizing things we're already doing to provide that information.
Thank you. Janet?
Tracy, please unmute your mic.
Hi, thank you. Sorry. So follow-up question to my earlier one as I was pondering your answer. Thank you for your answer. So back to the investments in the Chandler account, I'm still thinking about it as a potential revenue stream. So when the fixed income assets in that account mature, and, are you going to just roll them over? Who's managing that account? Is there an opportunity for those investments to become something like more dividend yielding that could actually be used as an ongoing revenue stream? I'm not an investment advisor. I don't know all of the different options out there, but I have to imagine there are certain types of equities that yield regular dividends. Just trying to think about, and some of the dividends are actually very good. You get like 7 to 10% dividends on certain types of equities. So could the investment advisor look into types of options that could help monetize the Chandler account a little bit better as a revenue stream for the city? Or was there a different goal for that account, which I'm not sure about, and the money is actually eventually meant to be used for something else? Thank you.
So I'm going to start with your last statement. Is there a different goal for this account? So when we're looking at our investments in government, we're really focused first and foremost on safety, and secondly on liquidity. And the state actually has a lot of rules about what we can and cannot invest in. So we follow those rules. We actually put them in our investment policy that says what percentages we can have in each area. Also, in terms of when they come to maturity, we do work, so we work hand in hand with our investment advisor to say, hey, what are we going to do with these dollars? When do we think we're going to need them? A good example is when we understood we have the possibility of having to pay back a large chunk of the money we're investing. We went to move our investments from more of a 3-year horizon to a 2-year horizon, kind of shortening that down, knowing we may need to pull on those dollars, and we wanted to be prudent, and if we had to not do it at a loss to the city. So we are working hand in hand with our investment advisors. We are focused on safety and liquidity, so sometimes it's nice to see those 7 and 10% yields. It's just not something the city has has access to. And so I would encourage you, I know you said you're not an investment advisor. If you ever get a chance or you have the opportunity to sit in on our audit committee meeting when Chandler comes and gives their presentations, Carlos from Chandler does a phenomenal job explaining how all of that works, what's happening in the markets and what's happening with the city investments as well. So I would encourage you to try to make that meeting. Those are posted on our website if you want to know when those meetings are taking place.
Anybody else, Janet? Yes.
So I had a two-part question. The first was, is the city having to pay for your expenses on housing element? Because that is coming down from the state. But in the budget, I see some line items for housing element related spend. And so is there any way to apply for grants for covering that cost? Because that seems to be a never-ending cost. You've got all these drafts you got to keep working through, and then you've got recurring costs on I think of every few years basis. So that's the first part of my question. The second part of my question, I was looking at the CIP projects from OpenGov, and I see a school walk audit that is $939,000, and I hope you can take a look at that to see if that's something that you can hopefully see if that's a spend that we can reclaim maybe.
Okay.
And I don't understand how the CIP that is already approved can be reclaimed. I don't know if there's a precedent to doing that, but we are in unprecedented times, so maybe that's something you can educate the public on as well, as to how approved and allocated CIP can be re-examined and reclaimed.
Not a problem. Great questions. So I will take the housing element costs, and then Matt's going to take the latter question. So the short answer to you, Santosh, is yes and yes. So is city paying for the housing element? Yes. But is there available grants? Yes. So the state, when they put out this statement, this requirement, they also made some available grants, and they're in the range of $200,000 to $400,000. In order to put together a compliant housing element for any city of our size, you're looking at close to $1 million to $2 million, depending on how much resource that we're drawing. The longer it drags out, the more money it's going to take, just like anywhere else. So the short answer is yes, we're paying for it, and it's completely coming out of the city general fund, but there is available grants from the state to help us alleviate some of that. Matt.
Thank you, and thank you, Santosh, for the great questions. If video can catch me on the center mic. The school walk audit is a great question. That is actually paid for with a grant, and that's dollars that Apple has contributed to the city for a number of projects. So that's a great way for us to deliver CIP projects without general fund expense. So a good example of how the funding identified in the CIP is important, and something that we'll continue to look at for our CIP program as well in terms of how we can fund through alternate ways. And one of the things we'll be bringing to the council in short order in next month or so is a preview of our CIP, where we're at today, and then where we think we want to head, and get the council feedback and direction on that as well. So lots of CIP discussions coming up. Keep in mind, CIP expenses are one-time expenses. They're not ongoing expenses, so they don't solve our ongoing structural deficit, although any dollar does help, as we know.
Thank you, Matt. And along the line of, feel free to come up, along the line of a partnership and sponsorship in this alternative delivery mode. So I saw that there was a comment from Peggy that we misspoke on her comment on the 50-50. So along the spirits, Peggy was suggesting a 50-50 split on the sidewalk. That's a great suggestion we can look into. And I think that's really going along with this whole spirit that we're not in this alone. We're in this together with all of you. So if there's any sort of a partnership, halfway compromise that we can come, that's what we need to hear.
Yeah, hi. Hi, my name is Subhash. I think Santosh asked a great question. So can you elaborate on what the housing elements involves, and what does the school audit involve? What does it involve?
The housing element?
And the school audit.
So school audit is Matt's, but I'll get into the housing element. It's the reason it's very dear to my heart. My background's in planning. So every 8 years, the state asked each city to come up with an idea or a plan to satisfy a number of units that the state stipulates for that city to fulfill. Keep in mind, the city is not in production business. We can always produce a plan, but we're not here to build. So for this housing element cycle, the state has given us a number for the next 8 years to finish building. The city has to figure out all of the sorts of ways, policies to encourage that development. And why is that? If we don't fulfill our requirement, the number of units, the state can file litigation against us. And the state has also passed a law to say for those cities who have not taken the state seriously, you can file for a builder's remedy project. What is a builder's remedy project in plain English? They can bypass all of the local standards and rule and just get a building permit. And this is really the state way of saying, city, you either get your compliant housing elements so you can develop the city as you see fit, or we'll come in and help you to get the units there. So every 8 years, the state gives us some directives as how to get there. So that's kind of the housing element in a nutshell.
So just to clarify, I understand that part, but where does the cost, why is there a cost involved?
Why is there a cost? So how do you get that plan, right? So I have staff, I have consultant, I have attorneys reviewing, and we have all of this work to get that. And also there's environmental work. So my staff doesn't have the expertise to provide the California Environmental Quality Act, so CEQA. So we need to rely on those professionals to get that. That's where the cost comes in.
Got it. Thank you. But I think there was a question earlier. Why can't this be coming from the state's housing element budget, and how can we eliminate consultants?
I will see you in Sacramento. I love that suggestion.
No, I'm serious.
I don't know if I can answer this politically on the dais right here. So when the state makes a requirement, they basically said this is the new requirement. City, figure it out. That's how the government works.
I think we like to refer to those as unfunded mandates.
Elegantly put, yeah.
And I'll talk briefly about the school walk audits again. So one of the guidances that we have from the council is on making sure that our infrastructure is safe for all modes of transportation, including bicycles and pedestrians. And nowhere is that more true than around schools. A school walk audit allows us the opportunity to explore the areas around our schools, how kids are getting to school, and make sure that those pathways are safe, identify corrections or improvements that we need to make, and to implement those improvements. So that's what the point of a school walk audit. And it feeds into another plan that we're working on, which is a Vision Zero plan. Vision Zero is about having zero significant collisions or fatalities within a city. It's a high level, big, lofty goal, and it's something that we're working on as well now, again, through the use of grant funding to get there. So it sets out lofty goals for us. The school walk audit is actually an implementation of something that would fold right nicely into a Vision Zero plan.
Thank you, Matt. Hopefully that gives you a nutshell of the challenges that we often see in a local government. So we received a comment from Jennifer Griffin asking why the meeting was not advertised. Just to clarify, this is not a council meeting, therefore we don't typically publish an agenda for this type of meeting. I believe this meeting was included in last items of interest publication. It was also informed to the members of the public, but I definitely agree we should, despite that there's a heavy storm coming to us, maybe weather's the factor, but maybe we will take pay more attention in terms of reaching out to the public so that the next meeting that we hold could be well attended. And I definitely agree with you on that, Jennifer.
We have 2 hands raised.
Oh, go for it, Janet.
Jennifer, please unmute your mic.
Sorry, I have a new tablet and it's fighting with me. Yes, I just got back from Santa Cruz, was on 17, awful weather. I'm glad that I got an email from the city that this meeting was tonight because I did not know. I check regularly. We have a heavy stuff going on, and I'm very, very upset that no more effort was made to advertise this. And I'm just from the standpoint that I don't know, we lost an hour. I don't know what you were talking about. I don't know whether this meeting was about the city budget, if it was about, I heard someone talking about the housing element, which I'm very, very upset about. And can you explain what you all did for the last hour and how we can address questions? And also, when is the second budget meeting? I don't know what budget you're talking about, whether it's the financial state the city is in, or if this is, I mean, I was there Tuesday at the Planning Commission meeting, and we went over the general plan and we went over the housing element. I don't know what this meeting was, and I'm sorry, I expect any things that are in the council reports at the end of the meeting. I expect someone to verbally say what is in there. I don't have time to constantly read items in the agenda that are in files. Okay, that's my comment, that's my problem, but I would really appreciate it if someone would talk in public about what are in those documents. This is what happened tonight. I can see the visual and there is no one at this meeting. And I don't know, I don't see the city council at the meeting. I see some staff over there. But if we're gonna do this again, we need to advertise it. Thursday night is not normally a night that you have meetings like this. That's just my comment. But can you explain to me what this meeting was about, and then how can we interact with all of you to try to get the questions answered? I can't really tell. It's like I have 3 seconds because we've got a split monitor here. Anyway, I'm sorry if I sound upset, but the weather on 17 was awful. So anyway, yes, thank you very much. If you could address my questions, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course, Jennifer. First of all, please drive safely. Your safety is really #1 priority for us. So I do apologize sincerely that like I said many times, that we probably could have done a better job advertising and outreaching to the community. Then again, I can't compete with the weather. So this is a community budget meeting where we're bringing some of the latest updates that staff has bring into City Council, and also allowing an opportunity to have an interactive conversation with those who are interested. So that's really the intent of this meeting. And along the line of how can you get involved, this meeting is being recorded and also being televised on YouTube. It will stay on City's channel for some time. I apologize that you missed the first hour, but when you get home safely, you can easily go back and rewatch the first hour. There's no additional new information that is being presented to the members of the public tonight. However, per my request, I asked for a Pamela's watered down version of Municipal Finance 101. So this is a little bit different presentation than what Christina usually does to the City Council. This is a more, I call it the plain English version of it. And we also, towards the end of the presentation, have many, many ways to engage the community. So there are emails, we have QR code, and we will have our second community meeting outlined in our roadmap sometime in April. We don't have a date set yet. We're still looking for a plausible date, but what I definitely heard from you that Thursday night might not be a suitable time, so we'll look for other dates. But just keep in mind, this is not a council meeting. This is a time where staff can interact with the members of the public. Jenna, do you have another hand up? Okay, go for it.
Peggy, please unmute your mic.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to talk more than once. First, I want to suggest that you should have the meeting, the workshop 2, or any other workshops put on the homepage and on the calendar. It doesn't have to be in that big calendar, but Kirsten was able to get it on so that we could access the links with only less than an hour's notice. So I think a lot of people check the homepage, see, put it there, and on the calendar where more events are. In response to, as a senior on a fixed income, we supplement our income with dividends and interest. And interest now has become a big deal. You have a long-standing account with Wells Fargo with $50 million. I've brought this up before, but I want to reiterate that you have a long-standing relationship with them. And maybe there's a policy that says you can't invest, but someone needs to go back and talk to them, because 5% of 50 million is $2.5 million. Who's making that money? And this is it's over half of what we're short. This is really important. We need to get interest on that money that's just sitting there. 1% of 50 million is $500,000. That's a lot of money. So it would behoove the city to go back and exercise your relationship or rework that relationship with Wells Fargo or look at elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. We'll definitely look into the investment policy. I believe this is something Admin Services is working on anyway. We'll take your suggestion to heart. I just want to briefly mention that Jennifer did have a comment asking what the roadmap is. So it is a roadmap how we can get council to adopt this year's budget. Jennifer, if you're okay, we'll have Christina follow up with you with the presentation and also just kind of guide you to that slide. Kitty?
Thank you. And again, representing myself only, I did hear a question about the housing element, and I get asked how to look things up, and I just want to bring up that if you're looking for a contract, you go to the Cupertino Records Digital Archives under Agreements. Agreements is for contracts, and you can just punch in the box any name, and it'll pull that up, and then you can look at the contracts. And then there's questions about with regards to accounts payable, how much we've paid for someone in a contract, and then that is under resolutions. And again, just type the name in, and it'll be pulling up the accounts payable that'll show that. So I would like perhaps some coaching like that for the public, so that more people are aware of how to do that, so that they can look things up themselves. Going back to the housing element update, I do remember that we got some grants, and when I'm going through this packet that we just had from the 21st, I couldn't locate it all here, and I'm wondering, I just had one carryover, and I know this isn't the total amount, it's $108,000 for the housing element. So if we could have that information and,
Sure.
and how to look that up and find out how much the whole contract was for, how much we've paid out so far. Maybe that could go on the housing element update page as well, so that we know how much this process is costing our city. I've also been kind of curious, kind of off topic, for how much all the new housing laws have cost everyone across the state in order to implement them and put them into our budgets, because that's kind of a state unfunded mandate. You now have to do all this legal work. But I appreciate the education, and I'm really happy that more people are getting interested in the budget. And I think the more that you simplify it, and I think you'll get more input, and I think that's a really good thing. So thank you.
So the question on the housing element of funding and contract. Oh, so before we get there, I think there was a great suggestion if we can do another video or a simple tutorial on how to look up on APs and contracts and whatnot. Or do you have one?
I was thinking Councilmember Moore did such a great job of describing how you go do that. We may use a voiceover and show the clicks on the screen as we're trying to work smarter, not harder with our stuff. You keep coming up with those great how do you do this stuff, Councilmember Moore. You may end up on some extra videos here and there on the how-tos.
Yeah. And then I'll take you in a second. And then in terms of the total dollar expense on the housing element, it's still tabulating. We haven't got to the finish line yet. I do understand in my planning days that the state grants it's only reimbursable, right? So for the money that you have spent, then you go back and tell them how you spend it, and then the state will take time to process that and to come back. So it's not an immediate reimbursement, and sometimes it goes through. But I agree with your assessment, so we should have an idea how much is this costing us. And your last comment on the new housing law, I'll have to talk to Christina and Ben to figure out if there's a way that we can track this. A lot of this, you have to look at it differently. We are collecting building permit fees, so some of those would offset some of the additional costs. So I will be talking to other managers to see if any city is tracking these kind of expense, but good suggestion. Thank you. Yes.
And then I also did want to do a time check. This meeting scheduled to go till 6:30, so
Yes.
we've got about 7 minutes left.
Yep.
Okay. So one quick thing, not everyone is a finance background. Like me, I don't have anything. I don't know like what is income, what is expenditure. So, but I do understand some of the statements from PG&E, for example, I'm giving. As I see, they say, hey, this is what your expense for electricity is. Like they give a snapshot of over the last 12 months. And then they also say, hey, you are not alone. You have your buddies who are on the same level or what tire they are consuming electricity. Like that, if we have a comparison, what it will reveal, even when I file my tax, right, they give me a suggestion, hey, this is what your last year tax filing was. Are you sure that you have to file this much tax? Is it correct? You think like whatever we did is correct? Like that, one is to start with, what is our last year budget? Where we are spending more, where we are saving. And then where the opportunity was lost, right? Because some of the discussion we had is Apple moved to Santa Clara or something, we are not getting revenue for Cupertino, if I'm right. So like that, what is the red lines, like where we lost, how much? And that can be an action item for agenda for next year at least to regain what we can do. And like whenever we discuss any item, right, we always say, hey, look at Sunnyvale, look at Palo Alto, how they are doing. Like that, is it possible to compare ourselves with the other cities and where they are making revenue and where we can catch up? Where is the opportunity? Like what is the opportunity cost lost, right? So it's like for people like me without any finance background, it will help. And not only that, it will, like even subscription nowadays, there is a utility, right? Like you have subscribed more. If you take it, we will let you know where you are not using, but you are still spending money on subscription because that is not in our space. It's like not visible, so it's lost. Like that, I think we should come up with something out of the box, think about and make how we can do a better budgeting. I'm not saying budgeting is not done with the efforts, but we should have cross-check and see what other utilities with all AI and other stuff that is going on right now. We should analyze ourselves and come out with something so that we are double sure that we are not missing any opportunity. And one other request before the time ends is, I do see like when you are saying like, hey, we save archives for a month or two, all these videos, I don't think storage is costly. We should make sure that we retain for 7 years. Anytime, whenever they want, people should be able to go back and refer conversations. I think there should be substantial effort to make sure all this engagement is not lost and they are kept in archives for 7 years or at least minimum of a year or something. A month or two, I don't think that's the right thing for engagement. Thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you. So I heard a number of things, and feel free to add in, Christina. So the length, so I'll address the last one, the length of time for the video to remain. Technology is not my friend. I know how to pick up my phone, dial in, and call my husband. That's as far as I can do. I will definitely brainstorm with my IT director, and we'll talk about that. In terms of finance, so there are a number of comparisons in the budget comparing how we did in the years past in terms of revenue. So that helps us to do the revenue going forward. So we do have that, and Christina's team can definitely follow up with you to see that. And so the first question is, yes, that's a great suggestion. We definitely want to see the trend so we can do a healthy forecast and projection. And the second answer to your question is, can we look at other cities? Yes, that's how we always do it, right? So we're all in this together. But here's the however. Not every city is the same. So I'll use two cities for the purpose of discussion. You mentioned Sunnyvale. Sunnyvale has a police department. Sunnyvale has their own fire. We don't. Sunnyvale also has their own utility. We don't. So the difference in having those components will not make us a apple-to-apple comparison when it comes to budget. And you'll ask, what about Saratoga? Right? We're similar in population, we're a little bit bigger, but we're geographically situated. Saratoga, to my knowledge, they have roughly 60 to 80 city employees. We have a little bit over 200. Why is that? Their Parks and Rec is completely contracted out. You're not going to see any Saratoga employee running their Parks and Recreation department. Their community development is a department of 2 or 3 people because they're slow. So it's a more of a apple and a green apple, a red apple comparison. It's still not the same. But to the extent that we can, we always look at other surrounding cities that are similar to our case. Case in point, we were asked to look at a Blackberry golf course. It's a 9-hole golf course, municipal course. So we looked to see who others cities have that. Unfortunately, we look as far as, a couple of counties out of the way, we were only finding about 4 comparable comparison. But your suggestion and recommendation is spot on. You want to make sure that you're comparing the right thing, and we're doing the checks and balance to make sure that we're inviting that second pair of eyes, making sure that we're doing this right thing. And I welcome your feedback. Thank you.
And so with that, I think we have a couple minutes left. If you want to wrap up, I wrap up.
You go ahead,
okay,
wrap up.
I get to wrap up. Well, I think I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who was attending in person, everyone who was attending in Zoom. It was really great to be able to interact with you in this way and kind of be able to go back and forth. I think we don't always get that opportunity to do that. So I just want to plug the survey that will be coming out. So if you can provide any feedback, we're going to use that feedback to make the April meeting even better. Hopefully a little more attendance, get the word out that it was a really good meeting, and they should really come join us next time in April. And then I also wanted to point out, if you did scan the QR code, we realized one of our QR codes was not working. The web address is still valid underneath. And so just FYI on that, we will update that before we post the presentation. And with that, thank you to City Manager Wu. I want to thank my budget team.
We have a hand raised from Jennifer.
Go for it.
Jennifer, please unmute your mic.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm sorry I got in late, but I just wanted to mention, if you all were not aware, there was a murder last night at Williams, at the bar by the CVS, Williams and Moore Park. And there were, I guess a gentleman was murdered, and then the other gentleman ran away after a bar fight. I noticed, I believe that we're not doing the license plate readers. Can you comment on that if you have time before you go tonight? But I think that with this happening on the east side, for security issues, we need to look at maybe buying those license plate readers, because I believe that was an agreement with Saratoga after an elderly couple was assaulted about a year ago down by Sunnyvale, Saratoga on the Saratoga border. Thank you.
Of course, Jennifer. So stay in, don't go out, and we're all going to do the same. Hopefully we'll avoid the emergency. So the license plate reader program is still on city work program. Council has not made any determination in terms of whether or not the funding will be removed. We took a pause, not sure how to proceed, but this program is still ongoing. So we're still looking into it. With that, I want to thank again for everyone that's either logged online and here in person, and I wish you a safe evening and enjoy the rain.